I turned into the driveway of the house I'd spent 6 years clawing my way toward, and for a second, I just sat there with my hands on the wheel, staring through my own glass walls. The place was exactly what I'd wanted. A mid-century modern tucked into the slope of Oakwood Hills, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of house where you're supposed to wake up to sunlight and trees and feel like the outdoors are part of your living room. Instead, that night, those windows were framing something else. My mother. And my sister-in-law. They weren't on the porch. They weren't knocking. They weren't texting, "We're here, where are you?" They were inside. In my empty living room, the one I hadn't even slept in yet, my mother, Karen, stood with a bright yellow tape measure stretched across the window frame, calling out numbers. My brother's wife, Brianna, hovered beside her, gesturing at the kitchen island, her mouth moving in that tight, critical rhythm I'd grown up with. They weren't visiting. They were planning. Measuring my house for curtains before I'd even turned my own key in the lock. If you've ever had that moment where your stomach drops and some part of you goes, "Oh, this is who they really are," you know exactly what this felt like. Before I go on, do me a quick favor so I know who I'm talking to. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I'm sitting here reliving this mess. It helps to know who's out there on the other side of the story. Because what I did next is probably not what most people expect. I didn't lay on the horn. I didn't sprint to the front door and start screaming about boundaries and respect and, "How dare you?" That would have been a reaction. And I was done playing the role of the overreacting, ungrateful daughter. Instead, I shifted back into reverse. I rolled silently out of the driveway and let the darkness of the street swallow me. 2 blocks down, I slid under the heavy canopy of an old oak, killed the headlights, and pulled out my phone. My thumb opened the security app I'd installed the day I closed on the place. Within seconds, my house shrank to the size of a screen. On the tiny display, my mother walked slowly through each room like an inspector, touching walls, peering at finishes, as if she were checking someone else's work. Brianna trailed after her, pointing at the countertops, probably commenting on how cold the concrete felt or how exposed the glass seemed. I knew her complaints by heart, even without sound. They stayed 23 minutes. When their taillights finally disappeared around the bend of the hill, I pulled out of the shadows and went home. Walking through my own front door felt like stepping into a crime scene only I could see. Nothing was broken. Nothing was stolen. But the air felt wrong. Tainted. Like the temperature of the room remembered who had just been there. I didn't cry. I didn't call to demand how they'd gotten a key. The how wasn't the point. The only thing that mattered was the fact. They had walked into something that belonged solely to me and treated it like a shared family resource before I'd even put a box down. I took a breath, pulled my phone back out, and called a 24-hour locksmith. "I need every lock on the property changed," I said. "And not to a cheap deadbolt. I want commercial-grade smart locks. Codes. Cards. Biometric if you've got it." He didn't ask why. People who call at 10:30 at night rarely want to chat. While I waited for him to arrive, I cleaned. Not just a swipe with a paper towel. I wiped every surface like I was scrubbing off fingerprints at a murder scene. The place was already spotless. I hadn't even moved furniture in yet, but I still went over the kitchen island where Brianna's hand had rested, the window frame where my mother's tape measure had left a faint shadow. It wasn't housekeeping. It was an exorcism. I wasn't erasing dirt. I was erasing their assumption that they belonged here. The locksmith showed up within 45 minutes. Stocky guy, work-worn hands, eyes that flicked over my face once and decided not to ask. He drilled, removed, replaced, and programmed, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd walked into a lot of stories they didn't need to know the details of. When he was done, he handed me a sleek keycard and demonstrated the new deadbolt. "Only cards with your programming or your thumbprint can get you in now," he said. "You can add or delete users from the app." "Perfect," I said. After he left, I shut the front door and tapped the panel. The new lock slid into place with a heavy, mechanical clack. That sound was the loudest thing I'd heard all day. It wasn't just a lock engaging. It was something else. The sound of 33 years of "we're family, we don't do boundaries" getting cut off mid-sentence. The sound of a guillotine coming down on an open-door policy I'd never agreed to in the first place. I sank down in the middle of the empty living room. My greyhound, Shadow, patted over on long, careful legs and curled his warm body against my side, long nose nudging my hand. No couch yet. No dining table. Just concrete floors, white walls, and the night pressed up against glass on all sides. The house hummed softly. Fridge noise, the tiny click of the HVAC, and nothing else. If you've never sat in a place that is wholly, legally, and practically yours, I don't know how to explain that particular kind of silence. It isn't like being in a rental, where part of you is always aware of the landlord, the neighbors, the lease end date. It isn't like living with roommates, where someone else's schedule or music or dishes live in the edges of your brain all the time. This kind of silence is pure. It holds exactly what you put in it. No one else's drama. No expectations. No unspoken rules. Just the quiet you paid for. It felt like taking a long drink of cold water after years of being just a little bit thirsty all the time. I leaned my head against the wall and listened to my own breathing, Shadow's slow sighs, and the humming appliances. They thought this house was a family asset. They were wrong. Behind that new steel latch, I was about to balance a very old ledger. People loved to ask me why I had to be so extreme. Why I didn't just sit my parents down like an adult and say, "Hey, I bought a house. I'm moving out, but you're welcome to visit if you call first." Why I kept a $680,000 purchase completely off their radar until after the closing. What they don't understand is that in my family, nothing belongs to the person who earned it. Everything is up for redistribution to the person with the loudest crisis. And for 3 decades, that person has been my older brother, Brandon. In my mother's vocabulary, Brandon was a visionary. In the bank's vocabulary, Brandon was a high-risk applicant. On a good day, he called himself a tech entrepreneur. What that meant in practice was that he had great hair, a killer smile, and a gift for pitching things that never quite materialized. He didn't build products. He built decks. Startups that would revolutionize this or disrupt that until the investors dried up, the market moved on, or the underlying math finally refused to cooperate. I was the opposite. I'm a landscape architect. I work with soil and stone and roots and water. My job is literally making sure gravity and time don't pull people's yards, and sometimes their buildings, down a hill. If I miscalculate a grade, it doesn't matter how good my pitch deck is. The earth moves anyway. Our family dynamic was written early. Brandon got to be the star. I got to be stage crew. When he crashed the car at 16 by taking a turn too fast, my parents bought him another one so he wouldn't lose confidence. When I needed a laptop for college, I was told that building character was more important than convenience and pointed toward the help wanted board. I don't resent the work. The work is why I am where I am. Over the last 6 years, I said yes to every high-end project I could fit into my calendar. Zen gardens for tech founders. Rooftop terraces for boutique hotels. Compact courtyards for people who wanted an oasis, but didn't care what the irrigation system cost. I didn't vacation. I didn't impulse buy. I wore boots until the soles cracked and learned to cook 5 different meals using the same cheap pantry staples. Every extra dollar went into a high-yield savings account in a bank my mother had probably never heard of. By the time I found the Oakwood Hills house, I'd saved $120,000. While I was doing that, Brandon was doing what he always did, spending tomorrow's money today. His companies needed bridge funding. His projections were always about to turn the corner. My father wrote checks. My parents refinanced their own house. Twice. They told people they were investing in the family legacy. That's the trap right there, the phrase, family legacy. Because in their minds, my success was never mine. It was ours. If I had cash in the bank, then the family had cash in the bank. Which meant Brandon had cash in the bank. If I bought a house, it wasn't my home. It was the Hartford Guest Annex, Brandon's future crash pad. A future home office for whatever next idea needed a prestigious address to impress investors. I looked around my glass-walled living room that night. Those walls didn't just give me a view of the Oaks. They gave me a view of reality. This house wasn't a frivolous purchase. It was a firewall. Proof on paper that I existed outside the gravitational pull of the Brandon black hole. I was done weaving safety nets for people who refused to learn how to land. Ugh. The next morning, sunlight hit the windows at a hard angle, spreading clean white light across bare concrete. For a few seconds, watching dust drift lazily in the beam, I let myself believe that maybe, the lock click last night had changed something fundamental. Then my phone buzzed on the counter. Karen. Of course. My parents don't apologize. In our house, apologies are cracks in the foundation. Signs of weakness. You spackle over those as quickly as possible. So no, I'm sorry we broke into your brand new house. Instead, this. So glad we finally saw the investment property. It has great bones. The glass is a little too exposed, Brianna agrees. Lower suite will be perfect for Brandon's soft landing while he pivots. We'll move his boxes in Saturday. Let's talk family rate on rent since you're building equity. I read it twice. Felt nothing. No shock. No fresh anger. Just the detached curiosity of someone looking at a new invasive species under glass. She didn't think of what she'd done as breaking and entering. She saw it as a site visit. Not my home. Our new family asset. The voicemail that followed a minute later didn't change that. Alyssa, she breathed in that low, conspiratorial tone she uses when plotting. Don't be dramatic about the key. We had to measure Brandon's lease is up on the 1st. He's under a lot of pressure after the recent business setback. He needs a place that reflects success. Your house is perfect for his brand. A pause. We're all pitching in, she added. You provide the housing, we'll help with groceries. It's a family effort. Family effort. That's one of those phrases that sounds wholesome until you realize it's just marketing for exploitation. There isn't a family fund. There is my account, my credit, my name on a 6-figure mortgage. But in my mother's mind, we're not individuals with separate legal identities and property rights. We're parts. If one hand picks an apple, the mouth is entitled to eat it. If the mouth is hungry and the hand says, no, this one is mine, that hand is defective. Selfish. Cancer. In her worldview, my trying to keep something for myself wasn't just rude. It was wrong. Karen had apparently convinced herself I'd purchased this $680,000 house out of some kind of charitable impulse. A generous solution to the problem of where to stash Brandon after his latest implosion. In that story, I wasn't an owner. I was a property manager. She was the executive. Brandon was the talent. And they'd already written the script. I set the phone down. Typed out a message that was as simple as I could make it. This is not an investment property. This is my primary residence. Brandon is not moving in. Do not come back here uninvited. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. You're hoarding while your brother is drowning. I didn't raise you to be selfish. We're coming Saturday to move him in. Unlock the door or we'll get a locksmith. This is family property, Alyssa. The capital letters were almost funny. I stared at the screen, then put the phone face down. Locks aren't enough when the people you're trying to keep out don't recognize your ownership as real. Text messages weren't enough either. Text is their home turf. Emotional, immediate, deniable. Easy to twist. Easy to reframe later. I needed to move this fight somewhere they had no power. Out of the Hartford bubble and into a jurisdiction they couldn't gaslight. Paper. Court. Law. I walked over to my drafting table, the one I normally use to sketch slope lines and irrigation layouts, and sat down. Today, I wasn't designing a garden. I was designing an exit. I pulled up the contact for a property attorney I'd worked with the year before on a nasty zoning dispute for a client. Smart, sharp, allergic to small talk. I need a formal notice against trespass drafted, I told him when he picked up, and a cease and desist for harassment, calls, texts, all of it. I want them served by a process server. Certified. The whole theater. He didn't ask, why your parents? He asked, full legal names and service addresses? I gave him my parents' info. And Brandon's. Saying their names in that context felt like unhooking a safety line. For 29 years, my loyalty to them had been the primary load-bearing wall in my life. Every time something cracked in Brandon's world, we rerouted stress onto me. More money. More help. More patience. More understanding. While I waited for the drafts to hit my inbox, I pulled out a legal pad. If I was going to draw a line, I wanted to see the math. Economists have a term, opportunity cost. The losses you incur from what you didn't choose, because of what you did. For years, I'd been choosing loyalty over myself. I started writing. Cost, every dollar I lent Brandon that never came back. Cost, 3 years of therapy to unlearn the belief that it was selfish to say no. Cost, the panic attacks in restaurant bathrooms on holidays because I couldn't get every dish perfect fast enough. Cost, the relationships I'd quietly sabotage because I didn't know how to accept being loved without thinking I'd pay for it later. Cost, the hours, days, years of making myself small so Brandon's chaos could take up the room it demanded. Looking at the list, it hit me. I'd been paying a monthly subscription for a version of family that didn't actually exist. I'd treated their approval like some luxury asset I needed to finance, when in reality, it was a depreciating liability. What would it cost me to walk away? Their disapproval. A few bad stories about me in other people's mouths. Compared to what I'd already spent, that was a bargain. The printer whirred to life on the side table, interrupting my thoughts. Pages slid out, crisp, formal, cold. You are hereby notified. Forbidden from entering the premises located at. Any future attempts to access the property will be considered trespass. In black and white, Mom and brother vanished. In their place stood Karen Hartford and Brandon Hartford, 2 adults with no special standing under the law. Just people presenting a risk to my peace. I signed at the bottom of each document. The pen scraped the paper, loud and satisfying. I wasn't just signing notices. I was signing a declaration of independence. I slid them into manila envelopes and wrote out the address labels by hand. For the first time in a long time, my chest felt light. Not because everything was fixed, but because I'd finally stopped pretending this could be solved with a nice talk over coffee. I was still smoothing the last label down when my phone buzzed with an international number. My sister Megan. She'd moved overseas for work years ago, the only other person in our family tree who seemed to understand that oceans can be a form of self-defense. Alyssa, she said, not even saying hello. Her voice was strained, the signal fuzzy. I need you to listen to me. Don't hang up. I'm kind of in the middle of. I just got off the phone with Dad, she cut in. He was drunk. He told me something and I don't think he meant to. The panic in her tone stopped me cold. What? I asked. They sold the cabin, she said. The air left my lungs. The cabin. A small, A-frame place in the mountains my grandfather had built with his own hands, board by board. Not a fortune in real estate terms, but priceless in other ways. And if you believed my parents' repeated speeches while I was growing up, mine. The balance. The thing that was always going to be yours, honey, to make up for all the times Brandon needed more help. What do you mean they sold it? I asked. When? 6 months ago, she said. Brandon dumped everything into some crypto thing. Lunatra? Lunaria? I don't know, he was too drunk to say it right. It tanked. He went upside down for like $250,000. She swallowed. He said they sold the cabin to cover his margin calls. The room swayed for a second. I grabbed the edge of the drafting table. And they forgot to mention that? I said. They knew you'd lose it, Megan said. Dad told me the plan. They were going to move Brandon into your new place so they could tell people at the club he'd bought out in Oakwood Hills. Make it look like he'd landed on his feet. Use your house as image rehab. Reputation laundering. They'd sold the one asset that had ever been earmarked for me. Then they'd planned to stage my brand new home as Brandon's success story to hide the mess. This wasn't just entitlement. It was theft. I hung up with Megan after making her promise to email me everything she remembered from the call. Then I called my attorney back. Amend the letters, I said when he answered. My voice sounded oddly calm. Add a paragraph requesting a full accounting of the Mountain View Cabin Trust. I want confirmation of the sale, date, and disbursement. And I want a forensic review of any estate documents where I'm listed as a beneficiary. He exhaled, a low sound. You understand what that means? He asked. You're not just drawing a line. You're lighting a flare over everything they've done with family assets. That's fine, I said. Consider this the discovery phase. I set the phone down and looked out through my transparent walls. The sun was dipping, stretching shadows long and thin across the dirt where a garden would someday go. They'd already sold my past. They weren't going to take my future, too. Locks were step 1. Paper was step 2. Step 3 was coming Saturday morning in the form of a diesel engine. I was ready for them. I'd woken up early, put on the kind of suit I usually reserve for client presentations and city council hearings, and made tea. Standing in my kitchen with the mug in my hands, I watched the top of the driveway through the glass. A moving truck appeared first. Big, loud, backing in like it owned the place. Air brakes exhaled sharp bursts against the quiet street. Brandon hopped down from the passenger side, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky, phone in hand, shouting directions to the driver like he was filming B-roll for his next day in the life of a founder vlog. Karen's sedan rolled in behind the truck a minute later. The trunk popped open on its own, probably full of groceries and essentials she thought she had a right to stock my pantry with. They moved with the casual entitlement of people rehearsing a script, not bracing for pushback. Boxes appeared near the tailgate. Brandon grabbed one, started up the path like this was all settled. He reached for the front door handle without even looking to see if the door would open. He fully expected it to. He expected me to open, to cave, to make room, to accept that this was just what family does. Instead, I opened it first, stepping out onto the front stoop and pulling it shut behind me. Then I turned the key card and heard that new bolt lock from the outside. Brandon didn't notice. He was too busy calling over his shoulder. Open the garage, Alyssa, he yelled, not even meeting my eyes. We're on the clock with this guy. You need to move the truck, I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The hard angles of glass and stone threw the sound back at them. Karen stormed up the steps, face twisted into something she probably thought looked like a firm smile. We are not doing this today, she snapped under her breath. We sold the cabin to save your brother. You are not going to embarrass us by making a scene. Unlock the door. No. Before the neighbors start twitching their curtains. They already are, I said. I nodded toward the street. 2 patrol cars were pulling up to the curb, lights spinning silently. An hour earlier, I'd called the non-emergency line. Hi, I'd said. I'm anticipating a trespassing situation at my home. It's family. They're persistent. I would really appreciate officers nearby in case they decide, no, doesn't apply to them. The officers climbed out now, taking in the moving truck, the cluster on the steps, the tension you could have sliced like drywall. Morning, one said as they approached. Officers, I said, stepping forward. These individuals have been formally notified they are not permitted on this property. They are attempting to force entry anyway. I handed over the envelopes I'd prepared, my deed paper clipped on top. The nearest officer skimmed the documents, gaze tracking from the property address to my name on the title to the notice against trespass language. He turned to Brandon. Sir, do you live here? He asked. Brandon shifted his weight like he was on stage. It's family property, he said. My sister bought it for. The deed is in her name. The officer cut in, holding up the paper. And this notice says you've been told not to enter. So right now, this truck is parked on private property without permission. He nodded at the driver. You need to back that vehicle out of the driveway, he said. No. Or we'll have to start writing citations. For a second, no one moved. Brandon stared at Karen, silently begging her to fix it, to say the magic words that always got him out of consequences. But she was just staring at me. At the suit. At the locks. At the uniformed officers in her periphery. At the fact that this time, my line in the sand had backing that didn't care about her version of family. Alyssa, she whispered. Please. Don't do this to your brother. He's going through so much. I didn't sell the cabin, I said quietly. I didn't dump $250,000 into funny money. I didn't lie about who this house belongs to. All I did was buy a place to live. I held her gaze. You did this, I said. I'm just not cleaning it up. The officer near the truck raised his voice. Let's go, he said to the driver. Reverse. Nice and slow. The high, repetitive beeping of the truck backing down the hill echoed off the neat facades of my neighbors' homes. Doors across the street opened a crack, curious eyes peeking out. This wasn't the grand Brandon's big move to Oakwood Hills reveal my parents had envisioned. It was a retreat. Brandon swore under his breath, ripped off his sunglasses, and stomped back to the car. Karen hovered for a second longer, as if sheer disapproval could make the locks roll back. It didn't. They left. The silence that moved in behind them wasn't fragile anymore. It wasn't something I had to huddle around and protect. It was reinforced. The siege was over. The fallout was fast. With no cabin to liquidate and no Oakwood Hills success story to trot out, the story my parents told about themselves fell apart. My brother didn't land in some glossy loft downtown. He ended up in a studio above a garage 3 towns over. Tiny windows. Peeling paint. No one confusing it for a founder's retreat. For the first time in his life, Brandon's actual income matched his address. My parents recoiled. It's hard to keep playing Perfect Dynasty at the club when half the neighborhood watched squad cars roll up to your daughter's driveway while your son's moving truck slunk away backward. The whispers weren't about his exciting new venture anymore. They were about the morning the police had to explain property law to people who thought they were above it. As for the cabin, the attorney's inquiry stirred up exactly what Megan had said it would. The trust had been dissolved without my signature. In filings full of legalese, my name appeared in all the wrong places, as a beneficiary whose consent could not be obtained in a timely fashion, while urgent financial obligations were met. There are ongoing conversations about that, conversations with more lawyers than family members now. I'll save that for another story. Because what matters here is this. I still have my house. And it finally feels like mine. If you walked into my living room now, you'd never guess what happened in the first 24 hours I owned it. The concrete floors are softened by a rug I picked out because Shadow liked the texture when we were in the store. There's a deep green velvet sofa against the far wall. A low-teak coffee table in front of it. Books stacked in deliberate piles. A mug with tea cooling on a coaster. Shadow is snoring gently in a rectangle of late-afternoon sun. The glass doesn't feel like a vulnerability anymore. When I first bought the place, the idea that anyone could see in from the street made me anxious. If they could see, they could covet. If they could covet, they could cross lines. I understand now that the transparency doesn't make me weak. It gives me a vantage point. I see the storms coming. I see the seasons change. I see who's walking up my path, and more importantly, I decide who gets to cross the threshold. I lost something that Saturday morning. I lost whatever illusion I'd been carrying around that my parents would ever be the kind of people who protected me instead of exploiting me. But I didn't lose a safety net. I cut a weight I'd been dragging for so long I'd forgotten how much easier it could be to move without it. I put my palm against the cool glass, watching the sun dip behind the trees. That buzz in my chest, the one I'd mistaken for fear the day I signed the deed, was back. Not fear. Charge. The feeling of a structure that, for once, has been built correctly. Footings deep. Walls plumb. Loads carried where they're supposed to go. I built this sanctuary. I defended its borders. Now I get to inhabit it fully. If you've ever had to build a fortress around your own peace, physical, emotional, or both, just to stop being robbed in the name of family, I see you. If you're in the middle of building yours right now, if you're saving in secret, if you're planning your escape in spreadsheets and late-night searches for apartments with locks no one else has a copy of, don't quit. You are not a resource. You are not a safety net. You are allowed to own something, your space, your time, your life, without submitting it to the family pool. If this story felt a little too familiar, share what you're comfortable sharing in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like this, about people quietly stepping out of the roles they were assigned and into the lives they actually want. Stick around. There's more where this came from.